is Monday, May 1st, and when the Marvel Snap Day rolls over later this evening at 10 p.m. Central, it will be bringing with it a new season pass as well as new ranked season. Players will drop 30 ranks as always to a maximum of 70 and a minimum of 10, and our new season pass, we bring with it a brand new card as always. This month's card looks to be a fairly generically good card that I think can slot into a lot of existing decks, and that is Nebula here. So 1 energy, 1 power. Each turn your opponent doesn't play a card here, gets +2 power except the turn you play this. So in a base level game, if you play Nebula on the first turn of the game, she's actually guaranteed to be 3 power under typical circumstances. Even if your opponent plays out 4 cards to her path on turns 2 through 5, she's going to get +2 power on the 6th turn. Now, obviously, there are things like, say, Nightcrawler or Jeff the Shark or other things that move around that mean your opponent could play cards out to Nebula's path all 5 of the remaining turns, but that's pretty unlikely, and it requires your opponent to jump through some hoops to keep your 1-drop down. I think on average, I'm going to expect this card to hit 5 or maybe even 7 points of power in a lot of games where she doesn't get Electroed or Killmongered, and I think that means she has the potential to be one of the better 1-drops in Marvel Snap. That being said, past just being a generically good card, Nebula also has synergy with a number of cards in Marvel Snap that can help her get even bigger. Let's run through those really quick, and then we'll dive into some specific deck lists I'm looking forward to trying out on stream later tonight when the season rolls over. The most direct way to combo with Nebula is simply locking your opponent out of playing cards to her path on initial turns. Storm is one of the better cards in Marvel Snap for accomplishing this. If you storm your Nebula path on turn 3, the 4th turn is going to be the last turn your opponent has a chance to play there, meaning on turns 5 and 6, your Nebula is going to get to scale up to +4 power, meaning she's going to be at least 5 stats for just a single energy investment. Similarly, Professor X is going to lock your opponent out of playing cards of consequence to her path in the remaining turns of the game, and Professor X also serves the important role of making sure that Nebula can't be destroyed. I fully expect an uptick in Killmongers to be running around, meaning I think Professor X as well as Armor are going to be cards that you want to consider as staples in any decks that you're looking to brew with our new Season Pass card. In addition to total lockouts with cards like Storm and Professor X, cards that are softer locks, adding additional cards to our opponent's path across from Nebula, also end up in stat increases for her. Debris kicks up a rock, +2 power because your opponent can't play an extra card out there now. Green Goblin hopping across, going to provide that -3 and an additional +2 to Nebula. And even Polaris synergizes in a similar manner because if she drags something over from a different spot on the board, that's again just one less time the opponent can deploy something there, meaning it's an additional time that Nebula gets to trigger. If you're going to be adding extra cards to your opponent's side of the board in a location or encouraging them to play there themselves with Nebula, Mojo becomes an excellent card to play alongside her as well. If you deploy Mojo to the same path as Nebula, it means your opponent's going to have to choose, do you want to fill in that spot and give Mojo his bonus, or do you want to leave it open, giving Nebula an additional 2? Mojo, in tandem with cards like Debris, Green Goblin, and Nebula, is going to very consistently be 8 stats for just 2 resources in these decks. Finally, and I assume this is an express synergy they were going for, Nebula also works quite well with all of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, Drax, and Gamora all get bigger if you play them at a location where your opponent is deploying a card. So Nebula is going to encourage your opponent to play at a specific location, and then if you follow up your Nebula with any of these Guardians of the Galaxy that get bigger when your opponent's playing to the same location as you, you kind of get additional stats regardless, which works out well in your favor. For the last section of the video, I'm going to put some of these deck building ideas together for people who want easy lists to import. You can find links to all of the decks I'm going to talk about here in the video description down below, starting with some have some crap, clutter, location lock control, whatever you want to call it. I think Nebula has a lot of potential to shine in this list. Not only does this deck get to leverage Mojo well, like we talked about, but Debris, Green Goblin, Polaris. If you get your Nebula early in this deck, I'd wager she's easily going to be 5 or even 7 stats in most of your games, which is an absolutely incredibly absurd rate for a 1 energy play. Our next Nebula deck is a more controlling variation that's looking to heavily restrict locations our opponents are able to play at, making it so it is more likely for Nebula to get to trigger multiple times over the course of the game. Storm, as well as Professor X, are cards that we called out as having strong synergy, but in addition to those, we also have Goose as well as Spider-Man here that limit your opponent's ability to play to the board in different spots. We're leveraging Jessica Jones as a powerful follow-up to Storm for the games where we don't have Nebula, and we're also playing Jeff the Shark as a way to get into that Flooded and Professor X location after the fact if we're not quite ahead enough in them. Dr. Doom also works as a fantastically powerful 6-drop, able to slam down onto the board and add stats to every location that Professor X isn't locking down, allowing us to spread out in the final moments of the game in a way that our opponents will frequently have a hard time keeping up with. This next deck I'm calling Nebula's Double Flood, and has a relatively straightforward idea to implement. We get Nebula or other cheap cards down on turns 1 and 2. We then storm the location that we've played to on turn 3, which means on turn 4, we shouldn't need to play more cards to that flooded location, allowing Absorbing Man to copy Storm and flood an additional location, meaning that once we get to the 6th and final turn of the game, there will be just one spot on the game board that our opponents are going to be able to play out to. Now, you'll note that I've got a copy of Wave in this deck as well. This gives us an alternative thing to do on turn 3, and Wave setting up our Doctor Doom early means that our Absorbing Man has something powerful to copy for the games where we're not copying Storm for our 1-2 double flooded strategy. Finally, I put meme in the title of this one because I'm kind of not expecting playing all of the Guardians of the Galaxy in the same deck to be something reasonable that we're looking to do. That being said, I would be remiss if I didn't try it at least a little bit. So this is a core of Nebula, our 5 Guardians of the Galaxy, along with Shang-Chi and Enchantress as a couple of additional tech cards, Armor to protect Nebula, and then Storm and Goose to kind of restrict the locations that our opponents are going to be able to play at, making it so our Guardians are even more likely to hit with their on-reveal triggers, gaining additional points of power. All in all, I'm excited to get my hands on Nebula tonight. If you want to see my first games playing with the new card after the season rolls over, make sure you're at twitch.tv/Jeff Hoagland at 10 p.m. Central, where I'll be streaming for a couple of hours right when the season drops. Nebula's a little bit different than other season pass cards that we've had. Things like Silver Surfer, Zabu, MODOK, Hitmonkey, etc. kind of spawned archetypes and require you to heavily build around them. Nebula, on the other side, kind of reads as just a more generically good card that you're going to be able to slot into a few different places. As we highlighted in this video, there's some cards that have express synergies with her, but I also kind of expect her to just be a card that you can play, kind of like something like, say, Sunspot, and be pretty happy with the result in most places. I would love to know in the comments down below what Nebula decks you are looking forward to play and that I should consider trying on stream this week to maybe highlight here on the channel later. As always, if you enjoyed my musings on this topic, snap that like button. Hopefully we'll see you back again real soon for some more Marvel Snap content here on YouTube.